This upcoming year or 2 years, the Broncos are primed to find their new quarterback, whether it's the right pick of Bo Nix in this upcoming draft or waiting a year to see who comes up in next year's draft or available in free agency. The Broncos are QB searching. I've had this idea for a while, so today let's go ahead and rank every quarterback to play for the Broncos since Peyton Manning. At an honorable mention, we have Kendall Hinton because of I wouldn't really count it just because one, he didn't technically start the game. Two, it was just because of all the COVID stuff. I don't want to waste too much time on him, so let's get into the actual list. And at 12, I'm going to put Jeff Driscoll. There's not really much to say about Jeff Driscoll. He signed as not a really notable backup, and when he got to play, he didn't do anything too noteworthy. He played for the Lions the year before, and since has played for Houston and Cleveland. You didn't really expect more out of him in his one start. In his start, he lost to the Buccaneers, throwing 17 for 30, 176 yards, a touchdown to go along with an interception. And at number 11, I have Brandon Allen. Brandon Allen was maybe more forgettable than Jeff Driscoll, even though he started more games. He went 1-2, throwing 515 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. The one team he beat was the Cleveland Browns, 24-19. He did back up Joe Burrow, 2022 and maybe 21, and he was the backup during that Super Bowl run. At number 10, we have Brett Rypien, who went 2-1. Rypien was actually drafted by the Broncos the same year as Drew Lock. Brett Rypien would actually start a game in 2020 and 2 in 2022. In 2020, he beat the Jets 37-28, and in 22, he would lose to the Jets but beat the Cardinals. In his Broncos career, he would throw for 778 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He played 2023 with the Rams in a depth role. At number 9, we have Paxton Lynch, who went 1-4. Paxton Lynch's biggest accomplishment was being a first-round pick, and that was really about it. In his starts, he went 1-3, but went 2-3 in his total games played. In those games, he would pass for 792 yards and threw for the same amount of touchdowns as picks, with 4. Even at the time of the draft, almost all of the NFL and fans knew that the Broncos had reached on him. Brock Osweiler was actually a key contributor in Denver's Super Bowl run, but past the Manning era in Denver, Osweiler really didn't do too much. He really showing Denver was more than a QB away. In 2016, Osweiler left the Broncos and inked a huge deal with the Texans. Osweiler's time in Houston was unsuccessful for the money he was paid. He would return to Denver in 2017. In the games that he started, he went 0-4, but in total played 6 games, going 1-5, and 1,088 yards with 5 touchdowns to picks. At number 7, we have Stidham. This is basically a bridge spot here between the alright and what was pretty bad for quarterbacks. Stidham 1-1, maybe a little high for only playing 2 games. Stidham actually looked solid and was 500 going 1-1. He lost to his former team, the Raiders, but beat the Chargers 16-9. He threw for 496 yards and 2 touchdowns compared to 1 interception. He is currently the Broncos starting quarterback for next year, although I don't think that'll last much longer. At number 6, we have Joe Flacco, who went 2-6, probably one of the most annoying signings on the list after refusing to mentor rookie quarterback Drew Lock. Joe Flacco disappointed in Denver. This was seen as his last chance in the league, although he bounced back huge in Cleveland this past year, resurrecting his career after a pitiful couple seasons in New York. His time in Denver was really frustrating, getting injured halfway through. In games he started, he went 2-6 with wins versus the Titans and Chiefs. He threw for 1,822 yards, 6 touchdowns, 5 picks. No one really likes to remember Joe Flacco's time in Denver because it was so irrelevant. At number 5, we have Case Keenum, just barely cracking our top 5. Keenum started every game in his single season with Denver, going 6-10, throwing for 3,890 yards, 18 touchdowns to 15 picks. A lot more is expected out of him in Denver. He joined Denver coming off a solid year in Minnesota, but even the Vikings weren't fooled by the Minneapolis Miracle. He has since joined the Redskins, Browns, Bills, and most recently started some games for the Texans. At number 4, we have Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has crippled the Broncos franchise for the next 3 years at least, but not all blame can be on him. Before even playing a single snap in Denver, he was paid a massive deal that the Broncos would regret, most likely halfway through the first year. Although showing some promise in 23, he is not a quarterback that can effectively run Sean Payton's offense. With the Broncos, he went 11-19, and in 2023 showed light after starting 1-5, going on a 5-game win streak. At one point, the Broncos were in a playoff spot with him at the helm, but dropping a terrible game against the Patriots would leave their playoff hopes out of their control and would be one of the reasons for benching Russell Wilson. He finished the Broncos' career with 6,594 yards, 42 touchdowns, and 19 picks. He He has now signed with the Steelers to be the starter for the 24 year. Teddy Bridgewater just makes our top three, and he went 7-7. Russell Wilson would probably be in the spot or higher if not for the baggage that came with his time in Denver. Teddy was one of the most infuriating signings for me because he would be a bridge quarterback that would replace the young Drew Lock. More into him in a moment. Teddy Two Gloves would finish his Denver career 7-7 with 3,052 yards and 18 touchdowns to 7 picks. Since then, he joined the Dolphins and Lions and recently retired. One of the most screwed over quarterbacks, Drew Lock, comes in at 2, showing lots of talent in his first season under offensive coordinator Rich Scangarello. He had 100 completions, 1,020 yards, and 7 touchdowns to 3 picks. He won all games except one that year. He looked to be the next Broncos quarterback. But after that year, Vic Fangio would fire Rich Scangarello and almost seemed to have hate towards the quarterback that Vic Fangio had drafted. Fangio would bring in Pat Shurmur for a more experienced OC. In 2020, under Pat Shurmur, Drew Lock went 4-9, also leading a great comeback, though, against the Chargers, but finished the year 2,933 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 14 picks. In 21, he would be replaced by Teddy Bridgewater and threw for 787 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. He would be in a blockbuster trade in the Seahawks in exchange for Russell Wilson, a trade now deemed as one of the worst in NFL history for the Broncos. He would lead a great comeback against the Eagles on Monday Night Football for Seattle in 23, and is now signed with the Giants to potentially compete with fellow 2019 draft pick Daniel Jones for a starting spot. Oddly, at number 1, we have Trevor Siemian. Being the most stable quarterback for the Broncos since Manning, he was picked 250 by Denver in 2015. He would only play in 2016-2017, had the Broncos closest to a playoff spot since Peyton Manning left. In 25 games played, he had 5,686 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 24 interceptions. Since his stint in Denver, he didn't play in 2018 but would join the Jets in 2019, Saints in 21, and Bears in 22. He would rejoin the Jets in 23 and made a couple appearances. In conclusion, the Broncos need to, once again, find themselves a new quarterback. Jarrett Stidham won't cut it, and whether it's in this draft class or next draft or offseason, I do not believe in my beloved team to make the right pick. The right pick would be Bo Nix, but somehow they would fumble that too.